Assalamu alaikum. Sabah al-Khair.
Oh, brilliant.
Welcome to the panel on Towards Change and Transformation, Harnessing Artificial Intelligence for the Future We Want. My name is Sasha Rubel, and I'm here on behalf of UNESCO to moderate this panel today with these wonderful panelists that have come from all around the world, which I look forward to introducing in just a moment. Very briefly, I'd like to reflect on the fact that the purpose of the Asbar Forum is to provide a high-level understanding of the issues associated with transitioning the kingdom's economy to a knowledge-based one as part of the kingdom's 2030 vision. At UNESCO, knowledge societies and building knowledge societies and knowledge economies are at the heart of our work. And this work is based around 4 pillars: freedom of expression, access to information, respect for cultural diversity, and quality education for all. This vision of knowledge societies also guides our work on the development of artificial intelligence. Right now, UNESCO is undertaking a global reflection on the ethical dimensions of artificial intelligence that will likely, following our general conference in November, lead to a process of standard setting in the fields of our mandate, which are education, natural sciences, social and human sciences, culture, and communication and information. For us, our work in artificial intelligence is guided by our Internet Universality Framework and what we call our Rome principles, which is that digital transformation and digital governance at large should be guided by 4 main principles. It should be rights-based, it should be open, it should be accessible, and it should be multi-stakeholder. So this panel, in the next hour and a couple minutes that we'll be spending together, will be focusing exactly on this subject, specifically what it is we mean by ethical and human-centered artificial intelligence, the way artificial intelligence contributes to sustainable development, and ways forward for international cooperation in this field to make sure that AI is harnessed for visions such as the 2030 vision of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So it is my pleasure today to introduce our wonderful panelists. I'm particularly pleased that this panel is a majority women and also with our He for She champion, because one of the commitments that UNESCO has is also to promote the role of women in technology. And women indeed are playing a very important role in the transformation of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and specifically in the tech sector. So thank you for being with us here today. First, I would like to introduce Sarah Al-Salah, who is from the investment team of STV, Sri Chandra, next to her, who is the Senior Director for Standards and Technology at the IEEE, Dr. Eva Marie Muller-Stuller, who is Chief Data Scientist and leader of the Center of Excellence for Data Science at IBM Middle East and Africa, Dorothy Gordon, the Chair of UNESCO's Intergovernmental Information for All program, and Latifa Karim, who is Assistant Professor of Computer Science and AI and Law at King Saud University. Thank you for being with us today. So I would like to start the panel by first asking all of the panelists an overarching question related to the theme of this panel, which is, for you, what do you understand when we talk about ethical and human-centered AI? And what are the immediate and potential long-term ethical challenges, in your opinion, raised by AI? So I'd like to start with Latifa Karim.
Thank you so much, Sasha. Hello, everyone. I'll get back to your question. Well, let me explain first what's the concept of developing an AI system. When we develop an AI system, we are actually developing, or the main concept behind it is to develop an autonomous system. And when we say an autonomous system is a system that operates by its own without the control of the human. So if we are going to follow this concept, then we will reach a level where we have progress in technologies, but not in humanities. So the ethical aspect, or the main ethical consideration of AI, is to return this control back to human, to protect and preserve the human autonomy in order to ensure that all the systems and the AI systems and the autonomous systems are used for good. So there are a lot of principles that tackle these issues. If I will focus on the European Commission's one, is, for example, do good, do not harm in your system, be fair, unbiased, make sure that your outcome is transparent, and preserve the human agency. Getting back to the human-centric AI, I would just mention that the human-centric AI was firstly mentioned in Japan, G7, in 2017. And the main concept of human-centric AI is about the use of AI to expand human creativity to perform well for human. So the idea is for all the stakeholders, they should have the responsibility for the thinkers, the responsibility of the thinkers, the designers, the developers, the testers at the end, is also to consider that all the development of the AI are actually used in order to utilize AI for the human good. Returning back to the second part of your question, is about the long-term and short-term challenges. I always believe that challenges of AI are related to the sectors. So there's no one challenge, but it's always related to sectors. The main challenge is that the technology is developing so fast. So we need to control the speed of, or to consider the speed of the development. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Latifa, for that insight. Dorothy Gordon, in your perspective, what we mean by an ethical and human-centered AI?
Thank you, Sasha, and let me thank Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the organizers for inviting me, and this is my first time in your beautiful country. I think that there's a lot of worry at the moment globally that the impact of technology could outweigh the benefits. But the fact is that we have not done enough research to actually understand the societal impact of the technologies that we're using. At the moment, we have, Latifa was describing autonomous systems. We have relatively little of that today. Most of it is still very data-centered. So we are looking at a situation where in 2 to 10 years, we're going to see a very rapid development of AI systems to be something far more impactful in terms of its transformation of our entire society. So if we are looking at a human-centered approach, we know the values that we respect as human beings. We don't want our technology to make it so that people with disability are worse off. We don't want it to be that if you are poor, you are discriminated against even more because of the technology. So we want there to be a balance. And that balance between the benefits and the risks of technology is something that we have to focus on as a global community. So I think there are a lot of challenges out there, but we have to recognize that the SDGs can be seriously impacted positively by artificial intelligence. It is up to us as human beings to organize ourselves in such a way that we'll be able to mitigate the risks. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. Dr. Eva-Marie Muller-Stuller.
Yeah, I completely agree with what my previous speaker said. We are at the edge of the fourth industrial revolution. We are changing the world that we are living in with data science and AI. And we really have to ask ourselves and answer that question. What is the society and the world we want to live in? What does it actually mean human-centric? And who's setting the values? Because human-centric and the values and ethics in the world means something completely different for whatever region you're in. You have all these bodies focusing on it. But when you hear people in North America and the US talking about it, it's completely different to China, it's completely different to our region, to South Africa, and trying to find a framework that actually works. We have a pacing problem in society at the moment. It's called the Collingwood syndrome. So by the time we develop technology, we don't really understand the impact it has on society. The moment we can understand the impact it has, it's too late to change it and to interfere. For example, when the internet got developed, nobody knew what it will bring to society. Nobody expected the changes. I still remember when we had mobile phones and everybody was like, why would anybody want a mobile phone? If somebody wants something, they can come by my parents' house. And now it's impossible to think to even leave the house without one. So by understanding these mismatch, and it's a massive challenge for society to interact, to say, where do we stop? How much do we want to actually stop innovation to make sure we are going in the right direction? Or how much do we actually support innovation? And even when we come to question about the risk of AI, people think that the point of no return, the singularity point, is the biggest risk. But actually, there's so many different levels of risk and biases in it. Bias in the data we produce. And it always comes with both sides. It always comes with the side of like actually showing how biased our society is and giving us the ability to act on that, but also the risk of making things worse. And I think that is something where the global community needs to get together, appreciate the differences that we all bring to the table, and find a way where we can work together, because AI, data science, technology doesn't know any boundaries.
Thank you very much for highlighting some of the key issues that I know we'll talk about in the framework of this panel, which is questions of cultural diversity and also bias embedded in AI, as well as the need to work not only between international and regional organizations and companies, but also at the local level to ensure capacity building as it concerns engagement and understanding of AI. Sri Chandra.
Good morning. Are people able to hear me? Okay. So, first of all, I would like to thank the Asbar Forum and also Omar and Sasha for inviting me to this forum. It's a great honor to be here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I also want to thank my own organization, IEEE, for giving me this opportunity. For people who know IEEE, the IEEE's tagline is Advancing Technology for Humanity. We are taking this tagline much more seriously than before. We want to know how is technology impacting socially. In fact, we have a specific society within the IEEE called the social impact of technology. So I think these are becoming great concerns. And if you look at IEEE 10 years back, it used to be mainly electrical and electronic engineers. That's the name of the organization. However, more recently, we are having philosophers, ethicists, medical professionals joining the forum. So I think the IEEE is looking at the world in a much more broader way. And as part of this activity about 4 years back, at that time it was almost cutting edge. We had a lot of opposition. We started a work on ethically aligned design. For people who want to know about this document, there is a website called ethicsinAction.ieee.org. So as part of the ethically aligned design, we identified 8 guiding principles on how we should look at this problem of AI, ethics, and the social impact. I will quickly run through the 8 guiding principles without going into the details, and hopefully I should do it in the next couple of minutes. So for the first one is, of course, human rights, the care for human rights and how it is internationally recognized. The second one is well-being. Well-being is a serious concern today, and how the success criteria of AI creators use well-being as one of the success criteria. The third one, of course, people have already mentioned, it's about data agency. How do you control your own data, and how do you decide how to share your data and what data about your identity that you want to share. The fourth guiding principle is effectiveness. The creators of AI, in fact, within the IEEE, we don't call it actually artificial intelligence. We refer to it more as autonomous and intelligent systems, should provide effectiveness and the evidence of effectiveness. How do you measure the effectiveness? I think that's very important. Then the fifth one is transparency, which will be the basis of all AI systems, and the decisions should be discoverable. Sixth is accountability, ability to provide unambiguous rationales for the decisions that are being taken by the autonomous and intelligent systems. Seventh one is awareness of misuse. If there is a misuse, there should be a recourse. And the last one is competence. You talked about skills development and capabilities. I think it's very important both for the creators and the users to understand what are the parameters of using AI systems and developing AI systems. With that, I humbly submit my points. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri, for highlighting the great work of the IEEE in this field. Indeed, the ethically aligned autonomous design and your publication that came out just recently has had a huge influence on the work, for example, of the OECD, of the Council of Europe, of the European Commission, and of UNESCO. And we look forward to continuing to working closely with the IEEE, translating principles that international and regional organizations are working on into practice in partnership with the IEEE. Sara Al-Saleh.
Thank you, Laura. I just want to start with thanking the Asbar Forum for bringing those important topics to the public. AI and ethics in AI is certainly one of the things that are going to shape the next 10 years, if not the next 100 years. So just to reframe the question again, the question was, what does it mean to say ethical AI, and what does it mean to say human-centric AI? And then what are the challenges that come from that? And the way that I think about it is, for ethical AI, it's pretty straightforward. It's essentially AI that adheres to the ethics and the standards and the norms that are followed in the offline world. What I find a bit more nuanced and complex is the human-centered AI. And here, when I was thinking about this, there can be two main definitions of what it means to have a human-centered artificial intelligence. So the first one is having artificial intelligence that understands humans, and the other point is having artificial intelligence that helps humans. And those 2 points carry very different challenges with them. So for the first point, understanding humans, and I think Dr. Marie highlighted that, as an operator, one of the main challenges that we're facing in AI is that at best, the data is missing or lacking and incomplete, but at worst, data is biased or unfair to certain segments of the society, and that, if that compounds, it basically just everything that happens offline just doubles and triples when AI is introduced. So that's one major challenge when it comes to understanding AI and applying that in a human sense. Now, with the second point, which is helping humans using AI, the main challenge here, and I think it's a challenge that's often not seen as important as the data challenge, is, well, how do you apply the outcomes of AI? So you build the model, you train the model, and then what happens to the outcome? Who gets to adopt the insights, who gets to adopt the solutions, and what are the measures that are taken to make sure that the outcomes are actually fit for the use that it's intended to?
Thank you very much, Sarah, for highlighting the way in which these subtleties with regards to human-centric AI are indeed a huge question to talk about in this community, as well as the way in which AI magnifies existing bias. I'd just like to underline that one of the richness of this panel is the fact that we have perspectives from both government, private sector, the technical community, international organizations, and academia, and that this panoply of different profiles and stakeholder groups really represents the way in which, on UNESCO side, we imagine cooperation in the sector of AI going forward as something that is both multi-stakeholder, comprehensive, and international with local impact. So thank you for those different perspectives which underline the richness and diversity of the issues with regards to ethics of AI. I'd like to pass now into the second part of this panel, which is to discuss very concretely, based on your expertise, ways in which AI can be harnessed to meet both the SDGs and, here in the context of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the 2030 vision. Latifa Karim, recently you were Artificial Intelligence Advisor at the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and you contributed to the AI policy development in the G20. In this experience, what were the key lessons that you learned in translating commitments at the G20 level to the national level and frameworks and principles into policy and practice concretely in Saudi Arabia?
Thank you so much for this question, because it's very important to highlight what exactly we are working on in Saudi Arabia. Well, what I would say that Saudi is actually paying serious attention to the beneficial use of AI, and that was clearly stated by His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Osaka in G20, when he talked about the optimal use of the AI and the IoT and the new technologies in order to enhance the society and the beneficial side of the society. At the national level, in previous G20s in 2018 and 2019, they were talking about the awareness of these technologies from the economic impact and the social impact. And for example, in 2019 in Japan this year, they have published the principles of human-centric AI. And what exactly we are working on at the national level is to conduct the studies to clearly specify the direction of the kingdom in those principles. And by establishing the new authority, the AI and Data Authority in Saudi Arabia, where there are 3 sub-entities, the regulatory one, the innovation side, and the operational part of AI, we can clearly state that by the presidency of Saudi in G20 in 2020, next year, we are focusing on the implementation of those principles. So we have already proposed some innovative idea of how can we use innovative policy practicing ideas in order to know how can we merge between the innovation and ethics together. And in the global discussions, actually last week there was a discussion in the FII about how can we use AI for good and for investments in those beneficial AI systems. And also the discussion, I would say that it will continue in this direction. There will be another global AI summit in March that will focus clearly on the dialogue about the beneficial AI. Also, there will be, the discussion will continue locally and globally. We have actually represented Saudi in many of the global talk about the governance of AI as well. So I assume that beneficial AI is going to be in in the Saudis' DNA this time.
I like this phrase that beneficial AI is in the DNA of the Saudis. I would like to underline that we look forward at UNESCO to working to support the AI summit that will occur at the end of March under the presidency of the G20 at Saudi Arabia. And then also really underline the interesting way in which you articulate the intersection of innovation, data, and ethics, which is something that is key and crucial in harnessing the opportunities in AI entrepreneurship at the local level.
Stop the dilemma between that the ethics will affect the impact of, or the economic impact of the AI.
I hope that we can talk more about that.
Yeah.
We've been allotted 15 more minutes very kindly by the Omar and the organizers of the Asbar Forum. I hope that that means that everybody is finding this conversation very interesting and will participate in a question and answer session at the end. So thank you to the organizers for allowing space for this important debate. Dorothy Gordon, moving on to you. You are chair of the UNESCO Intergovernmental Information for All program, and previously were the founding director general of the Ghana, India Kofi Annan Center of Excellence in ICT. Drawing from your very long experience in promoting international cooperation in the field of ICTs, particularly in Africa, what, in your opinion, is needed to ensure both international and multi-stakeholder cooperation in the field of AI with ethical and sustainable development at its heart?
I think let's pick up from that element which links innovation with helping society. And what we've seen so far is companies tell us that if you regulate us, we will not be able to develop those solutions that will be of benefit to society. because you will stifle innovation. And this is part of the reason that governments are, you could say, so far behind when it comes to understanding how to regulate the development of artificial intelligence. But the fact is that today many people are very worried about what we call surveillance capitalism. That is where you are the commodity because your data and the fact that people are able to invade your life and understand almost everything you do better than you do yourself has a lot of societal implications. So today we're at a stage where in the past state actors had the power. When it comes to artificial intelligence, we see that non-state actors, and very often we could call those non-state actors the private sector, has got the power. The analysis shows that most governments don't have the skill level required, neither do they have the finances that are required to be competitive in today's technology space, to be able to actually compete. So they have a great reliance on the private sector. So what does that mean? First of all, before we go global, let's go national. And I'm so happy to hear of the excellent progress that has already been made in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But many countries are far from that level. We have to concentrate on building the skill sets at the national level, even if it is simply to understand better what is happening, because there are too many governments which do not actually understand what is happening, what kind of transitions, what are the implications of buying a system. Do we have to be worried about the geolocation of our data? Or is that irrelevant given the kind of technology that we're using today? So I think that we definitely have to focus on the national. And that national focus has to be multi-stakeholder. We have to get not just awareness, but true capability. And then we have already made some progress on this at the level of the UN in terms of developing a globally driven standard setting mechanism. But there's still a lot more work to be done. We don't have actually the conceptual frameworks today that will help us for the kind of AI that we envision 10 years from now, which is going to move from big data analytics to autonomous systems. So we have to anticipate. We cannot continue running to catch up. We have to anticipate those technology developments and work together. So we are working at the national level to improve our capacity, but then we have to improve our ability to cooperate effectively around these issues. And I strongly believe that there are some systems that should not be left just to the private sector, that governments will have to develop some systems that are designed for their citizens. They should have the internal capability to manage those as well. But there's a whole lot of challenge here. And this importance of getting some international standards, but also some internationally comparable metrics that will allow us to measure how much progress we are making in terms of AI research, development and deployment, and actually gather the kind of evidence base that will show whether we are in line with the principles you mentioned, Sri. I think there's a lot that needs to be done here. There's a lot of opportunities for us to work together. And in another of the hats I wear with Chatham House, we are also very involved with this G20 summit coming up. And I am happy that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is taking such a leadership role. And let me also say that internationally, we are also extremely happy to observe the very active role that Saudi women are playing in this area. Data science is one of those fields that women are excelling in Saudi Arabia. Congratulations.
Thank you very much for highlighting the important role of Saudi women in the field of data science, but also the need to develop indicators and evidence-based policy approaches with regards to harnessing AI for sustainable development. You also talked about this very crucial need, which I know we'll talk about further in the framework of this panel, of both the skilling, reskilling, and upskilling both government counterparts, but also civil society as it concerns their capacity to engage with AI, as well as reimagining questions of governance models where the public and private sector can work very closely together. I'm going to move on to Dr. Eva-Marie Muller-Stuller, reflecting actually, Dorothy, on something that you said, which is underlining the speed at which regulatory and public policy frameworks are developed versus the speed at which this technology is developed. There's a huge mismatch in this regard with regards to developing standards and frameworks versus how quickly the technology is progressing. Dr. Eva-Marie Muller-Stuller, you are leading the Center of Excellence for Data Science at IBM Middle East Africa and implementing sustainable large-scale AI projects globally. Oftentimes in conversation, as I mentioned, it's said that there's a mismatch between the regulatory development and technological development, and the private sector, above all, is leading in innovating and implementing beneficial AI solutions. What, in your opinion, can be learned from IBM as it concerns scaling up real-life solutions to harness AI for sustainable development?
I actually think the biggest problem, you always say in data and AI, it's a common thing that people repeat, is there isn't enough young talent. And in my opinion, I'm saying there's lots and lots of young talents. The young and greedy, there are lots of them. Where I see actually the biggest problem is the senior people, the old wise men and women, that because I can teach everyone to how to be a good data scientist who's got a background in STEM. But teaching them values, teaching them ethics, teaching them the risk is far more complicated. And that's why one of the things I'm actually worried about is that it's not a mandatory subject at universities for people who go into natural science, for people who become data scientists. A lot of the businesses that I work with, they still think, they're still on the playground field. So they start with a project and build a POC. But they often don't think about the whole life cycle and saying, okay, what does it actually mean? We build a POC, we go into deployment, we have to monitor, we have to look after it, and we have to maintain it. And for all that, there's often no budget, no people, nothing is planned for that. And thinking about what is it what we want to do, what is right, what is wrong, and then putting the question how as a second question. It's not the first question. It's not give me your data and I play around with it, I find something. I can show you what to do with it. No, start with the question, what do I want to do? And it starts for the government with the question, what society do I want to build? What world do I want to live in? What do we want to build as a framework? And it starts for the business with the question, what is my company business? What are my KPIs? What are my company values? What is my company strategy? And how do I build a data strategy that actually supports that? And if you do innovation, if you do research, have it separated. And I think that is from the corporate level very similar to when it comes to running a country. Having people on the, having support groups, having groups, for example, we say, this is our committee for data and AI energy. And then finding the right people in there, finding the people with the experience, finding people with the knowledge about risk, and finding the people from the political side and get them to work together. Look at the education sector and say, okay, what do we want to do there? And how do we build the right committees? I would call them mini center of excellence maybe, or to actually drive the policy making, drive the innovation, and drive the strategy of the country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eva-Marie Muller-Stuller. I know it's a conversation we were having just yesterday when we met, this question of mandatory teaching of ethics. Latifa, we've had many conversations about this as well in the framework of AI and law, and the use of AI solutions in the legal systems, where engineers, for example, are producing solutions for law that aren't necessarily trained in the legal sphere, in the ethics of the legal sphere, and of the consequences of these kinds of actions and questions that are being embedded embedded in the production of the algorithms. And I know we'll talk about that more briefly with Latifa based on her great experience specifically in this domain. But this is indeed an area of priority, is training of ethics, not only for the engineers, but also for those that are engaging with AI more broadly. And I know that the IEEE, Sri, has done a lot of work with this in addressing this issue from both perspectives, both within the technical community, but also within the communities that are using the AI solutions developed. Sri, in this regard, in your role as Senior Director for Standards and Technology at the IEEE in India, you have been engaging with the Indian engineering community to drive regional standards and initiatives. Can you tell us more about the IEEE's work on ethically aligned autonomous design, what you mentioned in the beginning, and what you are doing concretely in the field of standard setting?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Sasha. So I will take two perspectives on one of the work that's been done globally and how it is important to engage regionally. I think both perspectives are equally important. So I mentioned about the ethically aligned design document where we published the first edition earlier this year. So the ethically aligned design was a seminal work of 200, 300 people who came together and developed this document. But the purpose of the document was not only to highlight some of the issues, the challenges of AI, but what organizations such as IEEE should be doing as a follow-on to that. So one of the core activities that IEEE did as part of the ethically aligned design work was to identify the gaps where standards are required. It's a very tough and challenging problem because when you are talking about ethics, what does ethics mean for different people? You know, people have different interpretations of things, you know. Where do you draw the line? How can we create a harmonized platform where everybody is speaking the same language as we are developing these things so that there is no conflict when we are developing products? So IEEE developed this series of standards called IEEE 7000 series of standards. In fact, it is in development as we speak. Typically, it takes about a good 3+ years to develop a standard where we build consensus of different people around the world. And the 7000 series of standards, it's a series of about 13 standards that is currently under development on the ethically focused aspects. So it covers a broad array of issues. On the one hand, we are looking at data privacy process that we discussed earlier. But the other challenging problem that we are seeing today is more and more younger people, like young adults, adolescents, children are getting online. So what does that mean in the age of technology, in the age of internet? In fact, kids today are downloading applications, they are signing privacy forms, and they are behaving as adults, so to speak. And in the context of that, how do we protect the data? What are the data governance issues? And how do we protect student and children data governance? How do we protect employer and employee data governance? Those are very critical aspects. In fact, when we talk about privacy forms, the privacy forms are pages long. You know, I don't personally read any of these privacy forms. I accept because I need to use the application. So IEEE is developing a standard where you can do machine-readable privacy forms, where the user of the application says, these are my concern areas, this is what I would like to share, this is what I would not like to share. And the application in between, the AI application, will look at the privacy forms and do a kind of a matchmaking and then give you a subjective analysis, whether it's an orange or a red or a green, on how do you accept this particular application based on your priorities. And then you can decide how to move about it appropriately. So these are critical considerations, these are global work. But one of the things I would like to stress when I'm talking about standards development is the standard is most effective and most globally relevant only if we have participation across the regions. It is impossible for people sitting in Europe, people sitting in the United States or Australia or wherever they might be, despite best interest and best intent, to consider all the different challenges, because some of the challenges come from regional issues, right? So from that perspective, what we are trying to do is we are trying to bring regional communities. This is a proposal that's under development, AI communities or AI circles as we are calling it. And how do you link it back to the global initiative of ethically aligned design so that there is whatever work is done in the region actually matches back to the work that is done globally. The final comment I would like to have is one of the things we have noticed in our ethically aligned design work and AI standards work, majority of the people are women. So they are contributing a lot, they understand the social impact much better, and I'm very proud to today that I'm a he for she champion, as Sasha introduced, and I submit my comments here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sri. I appreciate your emphasis on the need to develop regional communities and also ensure that these communities are talking with each other in order to ensure a truly international and global approach to ethically aligned autonomous design. You also underlined, similarly to some of the speakers before, the need to identify gaps, and this requires indicators and data, research and studies, as what Latifa was talking about earlier. So this is one of the recurrent themes coming up, is translating international principles into concrete policies and programs on the ground that harness AI for good necessitates data, and it necessitates research on the ground at the local and national levels to guide meaningful action. You also mentioned on several occasions the question of speaking the same language, and I'd just like, before passing on to Sarah Al-Salah, to underline that what I notice in a lot of conferences on AI is we talk about AI, and in the first 5 minutes, 90% of the room is on their telephones Googling artificial intelligence. And it's normal, because in reality, most people do not understand what we are talking about when we talk about artificial intelligence. And it's not only individuals. UNESCO and the OECD and the Council of Europe and the European Commission have had conversations together to say, okay, well, when we talk about artificial intelligence, what is the scope of the technology that we are actually talking about? How is it different, or is it a subset from data science or machine learning? And what exactly are the parameters of the work that we are trying to do in the framework of developing ethical principles? So this is something that is completely normal and absolutely essential, is building capacity of civil society in order to engage with AI, but also building understanding of AI in the first place, which is the starting block for a lot of this work. In talking about concrete applications of AI for good, Sarah Al-Salah, currently you are an investment associate at STV, a 500 million VC fund that backs and scales regional and global technology companies. Before that, you held several leadership roles in data and AI companies. Can you share concretely an example of AI-based solutions that contributed to sustainable development and the future what we want? In your opinion, what can be learned from this experience, and where do you see things moving forward now as an investor?
Of course. So concrete examples are plenty. I guess we tend to talk about artificial intelligence as it's in the future, but we have actual real-life examples today where artificial intelligence is really helping improve business processes, cut costs, serve retail clients, and even within the policy space. So some concrete examples can include a prediction model that can help us detect students and when they are likely to drop out. Fraud detection platforms are also very concrete evidence of how artificial intelligence can have real-life impact today. Another example is policy simulations that can help decision makers allocate their time and their resources. And I guess the second question is, well, what does that mean today? It's really interesting because you get to see a lot of founders and the development of ideas and how people are thinking about artificial intelligence in different domains. And I guess one thing to highlight here is that it's interesting that there's like a spectrum. So you can either have low-stake or high-stake applications, both of which are new. So for the low-stake applications, you have things like, I don't know, recommendation systems or something that can help you or can help you discover the next song that you like, which is very, very low stake. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have applications that can help you detect cancer very early on. So as an investor, the biggest learning I can, or the biggest thing that I can see is that we're really barely scratching the surface of what artificial intelligence can do in terms of helping humans.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for underlining these concrete applications to, for example, education, policymaking, and health. Very clearly, the work that you're doing has a clear commitment to sustainable development, and we look forward to hearing and working with you as it concerns future investment for AI for good. I'd like to return to Latifa. We were talking a little bit earlier about applications of AI in the legal system and possible risks as it concerns training and capacity building. In addition to being an assistant professor of computer science and AI in law, you yourself have developed, Angelic, a methodology for analyzing legal cases to predict case opinions in the US Supreme Court. First of all, this is incredible. And secondly, this is a real-life example of possible uses of AI in the law field. While AI, as we talked about, indeed presents many opportunities to ensure the rule of law, it also, as we know, presents many risks. In your opinion, and reflecting on the conversation we had a little bit earlier about capacity building, what needs to be done to train stakeholders, be it developers, lawyers, or judges, on this technology and possible risks and bias?
Regarding to Angelic, I think it's one of the methodologies that focus on the explanation, so the outcome needs to be clearly explained via argumentation. I will get back to the question, to the main question. I think a huge effort needs to be done because things are getting serious now. We are seeing legal cases in the courts from individuals and companies and people against AI systems. And last week, actually, I read about a legal case, the first of its kind in the UK, regarding, I think, immigrants, campaigners. Maybe you have already read about it. It's where they clearly raise a claim against the visa algorithm. They state that in the UK Home Office, the algorithm is biased, and there are a lot of discrimination against nationalities and age, and they asked the Home Office themselves to reveal how their algorithm is used. And a lot of discussion has been about this. The case is still in the court. Maybe if you are interested or your visa has been rejected one time, maybe it's very interesting to know what exactly the situation about the visa algorithm in the UK. Again, yes, for lawyers and judges to face such cases in the court, they need to understand what exactly behind this technology. They want to know what kind of questions. I will refer back to Dorothy when she explained that we need to know the metrics. We need to define questions to know what exactly the questions that lawyers and judges need to ask to ensure that what kind of risks are there and how can they reduce these risks. So the idea is, I was actually working with lawyers from Germany in one of the legal innovation centers. And they, for example, work on providing a simple QA questions for lawyers to explain to them what machine learning is, what AI is, for example, and from intellectual property perspective, and a lot of things that is related to intellectual property needs to be discussed with the lawyers. Different standards going to be changed according to the development in AI, and this also needs to be trained and mentioned. I think the legal technology and the ethics needs to be in our education now. It's already late. We have to integrate it in our law curriculum and in different disciplines, actually. Also the policy engineering, because things are changing rapidly and we need to know how do we engineer those policies and reverse engineer those policies. I remember also the Alibaba, for example, as a private sector, they launched a law school to focus on the legal impacts of AI on the society. So yes, that's, I would say, what exactly we need to do to train those lawyers and judges in specific about the future of AI and how could they face some cases? Because I assume that the bias is not only the solution, even in that case. It's not only, the challenge. Because even if we reach the bias-free, for example, data, we still have a lot of other challenges to consider that is related to explainability and the accuracy in the legal system and the accountability, of course.
Thank you very much, Latifa, for underlining this triptych, let's say, of transparency, explainability, and accountability, which are indeed principles and values that come up in a lot of the ethical frameworks that are being developed as it concerns ethical AI. You underlined the need for development of metrics, but also of capacity building. And I highly appreciate your last comment, which is that the challenge is not only with regards to bias, and we should not limit ourselves to saying, okay, well, once the bias is dealt with, AI will be perfect. Yeah. This is indeed a great strategy going forward to ensure an ethical and human-centered AI. Dorothy Gordon, you have been for many years a strong advocate of the importance of building robust local innovation ecosystems based on open source technologies. This also reflects some of the statements that Latifa made on questions of accessibility and transparency. And open solutions are indeed a key to this going forward in the development of AI. Open source and AI commons play a key role in reducing also the digital divide that exists with regards to AI development. In your opinion, what needs to be done in order to ensure that local innovation ecosystems working in the field of AI are supported, grow, but are sustainable as well?
Yes. At IFAP, UNESCO's Information for All program, we are very concerned with ensuring that this new society that we're building, the Japanese call it Society 5.0, or we would just say an inclusive knowledge society, should be inclusive. And that means that we don't want, as the SDGs always remind us, no one should be left behind. When we have a situation where we have such a concentration of power in very few companies, we call them the BATG mafia, some of them, you know, the FANGs, which many people talk about, those are the North America, Europe kind based, and then we have our Chinese counterparts there as well. These big companies have a tendency to siphon up smaller companies. As soon as you see an exciting company in Saudi Arabia that could give you an entry into the MENA region, you buy it. So I think that national governments have to be very conscious of how they can encourage their local ecosystems by not making it so easy for them to be bought up. And some of that, of course, is to do with global regulation. These companies have huge lobbying mechanisms to allow anti-competitive legislation not to affect them in their home countries. But I think in other countries, there's a lot that can be done. So far, we see in many countries the local IT innovation system, not just AI, because in many countries, the AI dimension of it is still very underdeveloped. But governments are not paying enough attention to this. They are not looking at how that ecosystem of companies can actually support the technology needs that they have within their country. And I think this is something that we have to really look at, because the thing about technology is, you know, for all of you who are specialists in the field, you know that when we design a system, we have an idea of what it could do. But very often we have what we call unintended consequences. And sometimes those unintended consequences are not what we would like to see at all. When we look at the impact of open, you were talking about capacity building. I have hardly seen, outside of few very tech-ready, overdeveloped countries, any law faculty that actually has courses on this. And this is something that has to be corrected. But it is not just in the legal field. Every university, because of the transformative power of technology, you have to start looking at whichever discipline you're teaching, you will look at the technology implications. And let me just pick one system, OpenGIS, Open Geographical Information Systems. We have found that many universities are not teaching geographical information systems because of the cost of the software. If you use OpenGIS to train your students, even at the undergraduate level in geology, sociology, geography, psychology, I mean, I cannot think of a discipline that will not benefit from geographical information systems and the data that is associated. You want the new generation to be aware of data, know how to manage data, and do the kind of data analytics that is going to drive the society. So I think that it's very important that all of us look at that and we understand that the power of open allows us to collaborate. It means that if you are sitting in Saudi Arabia, you could participate in a project online with somebody who is sitting in Jakarta, in Indonesia. And that kind of collaboration really builds skills. And at the moment, we need more skills. There's no one who would say that we have got the kind of skill set. There's a huge gap in the number of people we need with the skills and the pipeline of people with those skills. So let me just say that all of this fits with the fact that as we move forward, we do not want to increase dependency. I come from Africa, and we fought wars to be independent. And what we are seeing now is we are actually becoming dependent on external systems for managing our countries. I'm sure it will be less so in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia from what I have heard, but then you are very blessed in many ways. You imagine a country where the GDP will be less than one suburb of Riyadh. How do they cope with all the requirements we have today? So we really need to build that local ecosystem, that local innovation system, link it with the national requirements, use the kind of technologies, as Sasha mentioned, the open technologies that allow us to build capability, to allow us to share projects, get involved, that allow for a more diverse ecosystem. I think that is the point I wanted to make. We don't want a concentration of maybe 20 companies globally managing the AI. And I was looking at the patents. Who has the most patents when it comes to artificial intelligence? If it is robotics, the Japanese are way ahead. If it is other things, the Americans are way ahead. The Europeans come maybe 4 or 5. I mean, it's not looking good even for Europe. But when it comes to other countries, we don't see them. Nobody is filing patents. And that means that the ownership of the technology is not diversified. And so we really need to, I can't overemphasize this importance of focusing on our local innovation system. And then seeing how within our so-called global south, we can have better partnerships and cooperation. Sorry if I said it.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. This is indeed a very essential aspect of harnessing AI for the future we want, is ensuring that local innovation ecosystems are fostered and flourishing, that reflect also the diversity of contributions that can be made at the global level. Indeed, the development of an ethical AI can also reduce the digital divide between the global north and the global south, and looking at how to foster these ecosystems at the local level is the first step and key in ensuring a way forward and a sustainable ecosystem in this field. I'd like to move on now to Dr. Eva-Marie Muller-Stuller. In your career, you have worked across several different sectors, from oil and gas to healthcare, to create cross-industry competencies to leverage AI, machine learning, and data science. In harnessing AI for the future we want, cooperation across industries, but also across sectors is necessary. Dorothy just now mentioned the need to support the innovation ecosystem by promoting public-private sector partnerships, among other solutions. In your opinion, and from your perspective of the private sector, what needs to be done in order to ensure further public-private sector partnerships in the field of AI? I won the jackpot.
I think it's fire alarm. I'm not sure if it's a pilot or something. Then we just go to check first.
What does it say?
Do not use the elevator.
Pilot, it's different.
So this is possibly the failure of an AI system that set off the fire alarm.
But we'll check if it's something.
Okay.
Wonderful. So this is an example of AI systems that didn't work. So what public-private sector partnerships need to be established in order to ensure beneficial AI?
So I think we all need to move closer together. We all need to ask ourselves, what are the big problems we need to solve? How are we supporting our SDGs? How are we our sustainable development goals? How are we supporting the problems we have in the country or that we have in the society as we are developing along? And for that, I think we have to keep in mind that everyone is contributing on a very different level, but we actually will accelerate if we work closer together. If we look at education as what are the companies needing and how can they support education? What does a country need and how can they support? And basically, that's what I like about this panel and a lot of the organizations I work with. You have the research institute, you have the governments, you have the companies working together and trying to tackle the problems. For example, even when it comes to education, we're living in a time where we have a continuous expectations on people, continuous education. So it's not just school kids, it's not just university students, it's also the current workforce. How can we transform them? What do we need for the industry? Can we have more university courses? Can we free resources and say, okay, maybe they only come to work for 3 days a week and go back to university for 2 days a week? And what can the society develop as new concepts to tackle these issues? We also have, when it comes to talking to the risk and issues, we have a really high responsibilities on the industries. And that often goes hand in hand with what does it mean for the lawmaking. It's something that Latifa mentioned earlier. I had an interaction with a robot about 2 years ago, and the robot clearly spoke to me in a way that no man should ever talk to a woman. And there was no, if it be a man, I probably would have called the police right away. But this Russian robot who was not reacting to me, was saying things that were wrong and so on, and the person presenting it was like, oh my God, we should roll it out at schools, because the kids would be probably asking the robot question they wouldn't dare to ask a teacher. And I was sitting there thinking like, yeah, and the robot would give answers no teacher would dare to give. But with that interaction, I had no option of actually saying, this is wrong. This should not come into the country. This should not go anywhere. Take it back to Russia where it comes from and destroy it. Start again. And these frameworks are not there yet, and that is a big challenge for the future. The skill sets, one of the things that we are working currently on is you have a lot of university students who want to train and they're lacking data. They often work on data that is not real data, that's simulated. That is not the reality. That is building something where you actually know the answer for, and then you're finding the answer you were looking for. And bringing that together and saying, okay, we have the NGOs who are actually having big problems to solve. We have the students who are looking for problems to solve. We have the industry, we have the vendors like IBM, Microsoft, and so on. We have the technology and the tools. We have the industry with problems and so on. And how do we actually bring them together and leverage on each other what we actually, everyone can bring to the table to solve the problems?
Thank you very much for that perspective. You underlined the need to develop new concepts and frameworks by this cooperation, and this is indeed at the heart of the way in which we co-design and co-imagine the future of ethical AI, both between the public and private sector, but also more broadly between different stakeholders. So thank you for underlining the need to develop and imagine these kinds of frameworks. Sri, I'd like to move on to you as it concerns what you're doing concretely with the IEEE Blended Learning Program, because one of the things that Dr. Eva-Marie also mentioned is this need to train, again, through capacity building and build capacity of understanding of AI. The IEEE training platform on blended learning focuses on training and skills development for students as well as professionals. Skilling, reskilling, and upskilling, as we've evoked on multiple occasions on this panel, is essential in order to ensure that everyone is equipped with the understanding that will allow them to engage with AI and participate in the AI-run world of tomorrow. Can you talk briefly about what IEEE is doing in order to build digital literacy in this field?
Thank you, Sasha. So IEEE has an educational platform called the Blended Learning Program. I think in today's world, with the pace at which the technology is being developed, the gap between what the students are learning and where the technology is being evolving in the industry, that is becoming extremely big. It's a very, very challenging problem. So whatever we do is probably just a drop in the ocean. But having said that, we need to start somewhere, right? So one of the things we are doing is a blended learning program, which is trying to identify in emerging technologies what is the requirements of the industry, what are the students learning, and how can we bridge that skills gap. The other biggest challenge we have today is not enough skilled people who can teach the students. The number of students that are coming out in Africa and India is way greater than how much teaching professionals we have. So we have to look at new ways of teaching. We cannot retrofit existing teaching methodologies. So one of the platforms that IEEE is championing is a blended learning program, an online platform where you can do a voiceover, a professional voiceover, where when you are going through the course online, you come very close to actually a teacher teaching in front of you. I think that kind of experience needs to be there, because there are many online platforms where the completion rates are extremely small, because you cannot just run a death by slide, that's not practical. And it has to be outcome based, quizzes, how do you make sure you are evaluating the students. So in that perspective, IEEE has launched several courses on wireless, on ICT based mainly. Now we are also looking at AI and ethics, and the Global Initiative on Autonomous and Intelligent System launched a couple of courses. One of the courses is on ethics in design, okay? That's very critical, and what the industry professionals as well as students need to know. I think a lot of people think it's only a course for students, but today we cannot go and rehire the entire skills force. We have to do a lot of lateral skilling as the technology moves forward. So this course is targeted towards industry professionals also. One more course I would like to highlight is the difference between ethics in AI, between theory and practice. There is a lot of practical implications. You can talk a lot of theory, but what does it mean in practice? So one of the things we are trying to do is also create communities on ethically aligned design for, like EAD for industry, EAD for legal system, EAD for designers and makers. So these are important aspects that we need to consider as we try to move forward, and I think capacity building is really at the heart of all the issues that we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sri. In our work and cooperation with the IEEE, from UNESCO's perspective, we work a lot about this question on translating principles into practice. And indeed, this gap between theory and practice is a huge issue. And I'd like, on that subject, to move on to Sarah Al-Saleh, because previously, in partnership with the Berkman Klein Center and Harvard Law School, you researched the importance of multi-stakeholder approaches in translating these principles into practice. Recently, with MIT, you also spoke about about the brain drain phenomenon in the Arab world, focusing specifically on the tech industry. What, in your experience, is the importance of multi-stakeholder approaches in the ethical development and deployment of AI, and how could this address the brain drain phenomenon in the Middle East, but also more globally?
Thank you, Laura. I like that you combined the two concepts together because I really think that there's a strong link between them. So for the multi-stakeholder model, the research I previously did was related to the internet and how can the internet be governed given that initially internet users were based in a select number of countries, and now you have more access in countries in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. So that really requires a lot more engagement from different parts of the world on how we should be governing the internet moving forward. And I see the same dynamic for artificial intelligence. Now, the reason why I think brain drain is particularly interesting is because you want to have different mindsets and different values and people with different backgrounds to come and help form the next wave of artificial intelligence. And if you think about it, artificial intelligence or the really deep tech and all the research centers, you have nodes where concentrated effort is happening. So in a way, brain drain is a phenomena where the smartest minds go to places to try to pursue those opportunities. So in a way, that's a good. It's a good way to kind of bring in people with for a single problem or solving a single trying to solve for a single solution, but with a diverse set of backgrounds, diverse set of experiences, diverse set of expectations and incentives, and have them come and help form a solution that's inclusive, transparent, and most importantly encompasses all the different elements that the AI eventually will touch upon once it's applied.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for making this link between the future of AI governance and development and internet governance and the models that exist in internet governance, but also in platforms such as the IPCC on climate change that could guide the work of global AI governance in the future. I would like to close by inviting, before giving very brief remarks, all of the panelists in one sentence or less to say very quickly what needs to be done so AI is harnessed for the future we want, in one sentence or less. Latifa.
Okay, if it's one sentence, then I think that we need to establish multi-stakeholder think tanks for working on local aspects and as well as global aspects in order we can clearly state what exactly the challenges and how can we share the best practices in order to reach solutions for some of those challenges.
Thank you very much, Latifa. Dorothy Gordon.
I have a list. So first of all, let's get involved at the national level and also in global technical decision-making bodies, as well as encouraging our governments to engage at the level of the UN, because the UN has a very important role to play in the standard setting, the metric setting. This is the kind of forum that we need to do that. Then link the contracts that government is issuing in the area of technology with supporting your local innovation ecosystem. Finance startups. I'll let others speak about the reskilling, but on open data, let us say that we have the opportunity to set the data standards so that our data can be interoperable, that we can collect and have national open data banks, resources that everybody can pull on. This question that was raised, Sasha, excuse me, this question that was raised about the fact that our students do not have access to enough robust data to actually be able to train effectively is a very important one. And let me just also say that without public investment in independent, local, multidisciplinary digital policy research, there's nothing that is going to be able to help us to prepare for this future. and that I really want us to move, all of us, from a situation where we are consumers of technology to a situation where we are co-creators.
Thank you very much, Dorothy, for that incredible list, which I think provides a very comprehensive framework for guiding multi-stakeholder partnership and cooperation in this field. I love this phrase of yours, moving from consumers to co-creators, which indeed is a huge issue in also bridging the digital divide and ensuring that we are not only consumers, but creators, both of local content and AI solutions. Thank you for that. Dr. Eva Marie Muller-Stoller.
Yes, I completely agree. We need to come together as a society. We need to bring, as a world society, we need to start to listen to each other, and we need to start to understand what different values, what different aspects, ethics, ethos, and everything people bring to the table. And we need to understand where we now and where do we want to go together. Where do we want to go within the country? Similar to a corporate strategy. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? And then all layers. What does it imply for, and breaking it down and saying what does it imply for education? What does it imply for law and policy making? And really start to listen to each other and work on tackle these problems together.
Thank you. Sri Chanda.
I would like to do a call to action. And I would like for people in this room, the experts and people who are not in this room, to come and join us as we develop the standards for the AI and ethics, the IEEE 7000 series of standards, but also with our certification platform that we are doing on autonomous and intelligent systems, because that's where rubber hits the road. So please do look at ethicsinAction.IEEE.org, where you will find information on the standards development and the certification platform, and you can always connect to me, because to make a truly global standard, we need almost everybody to participate, and this is a very, very complex area. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Al-Saleh.
Thank you, yes. So I guess if I had one sentence, I would say that at its core, technology is neutral, and we get to decide how to deploy it and how to use it. So if there's one thing that I want to highlight or kind of enforce, is we need to increase accountability from the builders, from the governors, and from the users, and anyone that has a stake in AI, to kind of help build a more a better AI infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Sarah. In closing, I would like to first of all thank the panelists for their very rich perspectives. Again, these different stakeholder groups represent, from UNESCO's perspective, the importance of working together across sectors and across countries and borders, both as it concerns domains and regions, in order to develop an ethical AI. I would like to specifically thank Omar Al-Bayat and the organizers of the Asbar Forum for inviting UNESCO to share their perspective here and your wonderful organization. It's a pleasure to be here today, and we look forward to supporting the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in the AI Summit of the G20. I would like to close by citing both the Riyadh Governor Prince Faisal bin Bandar, who said, we are on the right path of science and technology. We look forward to the future and are moving in the right direction. And we hope that this panel has provided both ideas and concepts of how to co-create this future of AI and the right direction for the development of the Vision 2030, as well as the Saudi media minister, Turki bin Abdullah al-Shabana, who said growth in an economy based on innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship is essential for the 2030 vision. And we hope today that we have underlined the way in which AI contributes to innovation, to diversity, to creativity, and to entrepreneurship in the kingdom and beyond. Thank you very much for your time. If there are questions, please feel free to reach out to us on Twitter, and we would be happy to respond to those questions. Thank you again.
There's a question. He's dying. He's got a hand up. One hand is up.
Do we have time for questions, Omar? Someone has their hand up, apparently. No? Okay.
We'll get back.
Please.